So guys, in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to draft your trouser pattern, like your basic pattern for your trouser. If you see my face for the first time, please do go ahead and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any new video whenever it goes live on my channel. So what you'll be needing for this is the measurements, and I already have the measurements here. You'll be needing pencil, sharpeners as usual, eraser in case you make mistakes, your pattern master, straight ruler, and a hip curve ruler. I think needing a tape measurement and a pair of scissors to cut. So the first thing we want to do now is to create like a borderline. This is just to ensure that when you're doing your measurements, you're actually placing it on a straight line, horizontally and vertically. Also, you wouldn't see the reasons why I created this borderline here and here. I'm going to be going down by 3 inches. Yes, the first thing I want to do now is to add my hip line, and my hip line for this tutorial is, so from this borderline I drew, I'm going to be marking 8 inches. So I'm going to be marking the 8 inches across this line horizontally. So I'm going to mark hip line. The next thing I want to mark is my crotch depth, and my crotch depth is 11.25. So I'm going to do the same thing across the line. Then after this, the next thing I want to do is to take my full length of my trouser, and my full length is 40.5. So from this line, from this border line here, I'm going to be marking 40.5 inches down. So my knee length from my waistline is 24.25. So I'm going to be marking 24.25. The next thing I want to do now is to mark the hip circumference. And what I mean by the hip circumference is like round the entire hip. So since this is a pattern, remember most of our measurements, especially our circumferences, are usually divided by 4. So I'm going to be dividing my hip, and the hip I'm using for this is 46. So 46 divided by 4 will give me 11.5. Then I'm going to add an ease of 1/4 of an inch. This was something I learned from Sims by May, because when you're trying to curve in your hip, if you really curve it in very well, it's going to take in a lot of, it's going to take into your measurement. But that ease of 1/4 of an inch will actually help you. So even if you try to curve your hip, really well, it's not going to affect the entire measurement around the hip. I'm going to be marking 11.5 on my hip line, and I'm going to be adding an ease of 1/4 of an inch, so 0.25. Let me take this out so I don't make a mistake. Alright, so 11.5 plus 0.25, that's 1/4 of an inch. It's going to be 11.75. So I'm going to be marking it on the hip line. I'm going to be marking it on the hip line and on the crouch as well. I'm just going to draw the line just above. The next thing I'm going to do now is the front crouch extension. So I'm going to be marking the front crouch extension. Another easy way to get your crouch extension for the front trouser is your hip divided by 20. So my hip is 46, divided by 20 is 2.3. And since it's an extension, you're going to mark it out. Here I'm going to be marking 2.3 outside. So to create ease around your crouch line so that it's not too tight and you also have space to work, I'm going to be placing my tape back. So I'm going to be finding the midpoint from here to here. When I find the midpoint, I'm going to mark it here and on my knee line all the way to my hemline. You just take the tape and bend it to where the line stops. Okay? And then you mark. So I come here to measure what I have here, and this is almost 7. I'm going to be marking 7 inches on the knee line. Also on the hem. I'm going to be connecting this. The next thing I want to do now is to mark the waist measurement. For the waist measurement, my waist measurement here is 37. So remember I said for circumferences you usually divide by 4. So I'm going to be doing 37 divided by 4. And I'm going to be having 9.25. My trouser is going to have a dart, so plus 1 inch dart allowance. So I'm going to have 10.25. I'm going to be marking my waist measurement from this borderline we drew from the hip. So this is inclusive of that. From this point where I have my waist measurement, I'm going to be going up. I'm going to be going higher by ½ inch because we all know that your waist is not like on a straight line. This is my ½ inch point. After that, I'm going to be doing my dart. I'm going to be doing my dart, and remember from my skirt tutorial, dart is usually your waist divided by 4 divided by 2. Or what you have here divided by 2, since this is already divided by 4. So this is my midpoint for my dart. So I'm just quickly going to do this dart. So the next thing I want to do now is to connect my waist to this line here. So this is the line we are going to be using. This line now. So yeah. So my knee circumference is 22. And I'm going to be dividing by 4, which is going to give me 5.5. So I'm going to be marking 5.5 on each side. I'm going to be marking 5.5 from this center line we drew here. 5.5. And also the same thing on this line as well. Next thing we are going to do is our hemline. And our hemline, we are going to be taking the hemline circumference or your leg circumference divided by 4, and I'm going to be marking on both sides of this line. So I already marked the hem circumference on both sides following this line. So it was 13.5 divided by 4. I marked on this line. Remember what I said, circumference is really divided by 4. So 13.5 divided by 4, I place my tape here and mark here, place my tape here and mark here. So I'm going to be connecting this together. I'm going to be connecting from the hip line to this place. I'm going to be using a straight line to do this. So now we have our lines here. So for this side, I'm going to be connecting it with my hip curve here. But we are going to have to blend this edge as well. So on the hip line, I'm just going to mark like 0.5 inches out of here. 0.25, sorry, quarter of an inch. So this is going to help me get the curve for this. I'm going to make sure it hits this. I'm going to make sure it hits this point here, our crotch line here, and it hits this quarter of an inch here, and also blends back into the line. So this is our front trouser. So I'm just going to go over and blend all the hash lines. So blend all these lines around the hip to make sure it curves in really well to avoid the straight line here. The next thing I want to do now is to go over to do my back trouser pattern. So you notice that I try to do broken lines for the front. That way when I'm trying to trace it out, I know that I am going to be tracing out broken lines for the front and straight lines for the back. You can decide to trace out your front pattern if you want. You can decide to just trace it out. Use your tracing wheel to trace it out so there's no any form of mistake. So from this crouch line here, I'm going to go in by 3/4 of an inch. From this 3/4 point, I'm going to mark my hip measurements divided by 4. 1.5. Remember when we were doing the front pattern for the trouser, we added an ease of 0.25. Then plus 1 inch allowance. Well, 1 inch is not really allowance, so plus 1 inch give me 12.5. Let me extend this hip line out for blending and also to give some space around the buttocks area. You all know that from the hip, from the bum bum down to the hip at the back is always bigger than the hip side in front. So I have to ensure that I mark this same point on my hip line. So what I'm going to do is from this line here, I'm just going to be measuring to know how many it is. So this is about, I'm going to be marking here too. So guys, on this waistline now, this line here, we are going to be marking 2 inches inward. Remember this 3/4 inch we marked here? I'm going to be connecting it to this line. Don't worry, it's not supposed to be a straight line. So I just extended the line out. So now on this line, I'm going to be extending my waistline above, and I'm going to be extending it by 1.5 inch. This is just for ease, and this is something I also learned from Sims by May. You know, when you sit down and half of your bum bum is showing, this is actually supposed to help prevent that. So I'm just going to mark my 1.5 inch raise around here. Then the next thing we want to do now is to do the back crotch extension, and for the back crotch extension, it's your hip divided by 10. Remember the front one was hip divided by 20. From this line we marked up, I'm going to be marking 4.6 outward. Remember, from this line here. So at about here. So this is my back crotch extension. To mark the waist, from this raise here, I'm going to be putting my waist measurement, which is 37 divided by 4 plus that allowance. That's 10.25. So I'm going to be marking 10.25. So here is my 10.25, and remember we raised the front by ½ inch, so I'm going to be raising the back too by ½ inch as well. So this is my raise here. I'm going to be joining this point to this point. I'm going to go ahead now to create my dart. My back dart, I'm going to make it 5.5. So on the knee, I'm going to be adding ½ inch. On both sides. I'm going to be repeating the same thing on the hem as well. So ½ inch. And ½ inch on the other side. To connect the knee to the hem. This is what the basic trouser pattern looks like. So this is the back. If I'm going to be tracing, I'm going to be tracing from here down. So here, here, and down the hem. So this is how to trace your basic trouser, and you may want to just keep this master pattern and get your other tracing papers and trace out the front separately and trace out the back separately. So I'm going to trace it out and I'm going to show you what it looks like after tracing out. So you can, if you're using the kind of paper I'm using, which is very transparent, you can place the paper on it and you'll be able to see through the lines. Then you can just use your pen tool to map out the lines. But if you're not using a paper that is like a proper tracing paper that is see-through, you can just place the paper you want to trace on, place your past master pattern on it, and use your tracing wheel to trace it out front and back separately. When it is traced out, that's when we are going to have to do the band and also attach the zip at the center front if you are going to be making a shirt with a zip at the center front. But if you're making like a jumpsuit, unless you want the zipper to be in front. But if you're making a jumpsuit, it only makes sense that the zipper is at the back, even if you're making a play suit as well, unless at the band of your play suit on your waistline you're planning to have like an elastic of some sort and a very loose neck. That way you don't really need zip. So this is my back and this is my front pattern with my zipper fly.